Hey guys, and welcome back. I'm so happy to be able to give you guys a follow-up video to my last video on the Lingoda Super Sprint review, because in this one I want to talk about how you guys can actually win, since last night I received in the email that I'd actually won the Lingoda Super Sprint, and now I guess I can officially give you guys advice on it. Also for people doing the regular sprint and not just the super sprint, because this advice carries over to both with just a few tiny minor alterations depending on which type of sprint you're doing, and I'll mention that as well. So the things I want to cover is I want to go over the 3 or so times where I came really close to failing the Lingoda Super Sprint. I'm hoping by sharing these situations with you, then you can learn from my mistakes and hopefully not make my mistakes. I also briefly want to go over all the rules with you, because yes, they are in the terms and conditions and you can look at all the rules yourself. I found it quite overwhelming, so what I did when I very first started the sprint is I went through everything and only dot pointed everything that would make me fail. So everything that I could do that would cause me to fail, and I put it in a document, and I will share that in the description with you guys so you're able to look at that. And it definitely helped to clarify some of the things that I wasn't 100% sure about. And the last thing I want to talk about is just general tips for you guys, because obviously I really want to see you guys win, and these tips range from organizational practices to how you should make sure that you don't forget classes and things like that. So first up, I want to talk about the stories of when I almost failed, because I think they're super funny. And I remember when I was first deciding that I wanted to do the sprint, and I looked up Reddit posts of when people almost failed and things like that, and it was a lot of like, oh, I slept in and I forgot my alarm. And I always thought that that wasn't an issue at all for me, because all of my classes were in the afternoon and nighttime, so I didn't have to wake up for my classes necessarily. But all of the things that happened to me just from completely forgetting about the class itself and just not preparing enough, I suppose. And I hope these stories do help, because I think it is really useful, because for me, I was so prepared at the very start, I was so organized, and still I almost came really close to failing 3 times. So if you think that you're the most prepared person in the world, sometimes even then you can still forget or almost miss a class. So these 3 occasions are going to be in order, and the very first one was when me and my boyfriend went on a holiday to Narooma, which was only a 2-hour drive from Canberra where we were living at the time. And I actually filmed a video while we were there. It was my Speaking French for a Day with my boyfriend video. But during the time that we were there, we were staying at a hotel, and I did think that the internet was going to be fine there and everything like that. And this was during the first month, and the first month I was the most organized, and then it slowly kind of like went downhill from there. So during the first month, I'd put every single class in my Google Calendar, and Lingoda, once you pick a class, they'll email you and you can just select the option to put it in your calendar. This stuff saved me this time, for real. So what happened was we were going for a walk down to the ocean, and we were like filming seals. I had my camera out, this camera right here, I had it out, and I was filming seals that were on the rocks. And we were just walking around, completely lost track of time, right? And then all of a sudden I get like a ding on my phone. I look at my phone and it was the half an hour before the class reminder, and I was like, oh my gosh, because we were about a half an hour walk from the hotel. And what ended up happening was we both ran back to the hotel. I was exhausted. I was wearing like thongs, so my feet were not in a good way, and I was also wearing like a skirt and just not clothes to be running in. And as we were running, we were like had our thumbs out to try to hitchhike the rest of the way. And then once we arrived to the hotel, I was literally so stressed. I jumped on my computer, I checked into the class, and I think I arrived there like 2 minutes before the class, so I had a little bit of time. And I was just trying to not panic, and I forgot to check the internet of the hotel to see if it was good enough to have my actual class on. And then when the class started, literally the internet did not work at all. Not only was I kind of dying from having to literally sprint back to the hotel, and it was uphill as well, but also the internet wasn't working. So I was waiting there. It was about 5 minutes into the class by now, and at this point I thought that if you were 5 minutes late that you were going to fail the class. This is before obviously I realized that they're not that strict about it. So what I did was, I'm so glad I did this, I quickly whipped out my phone and went onto Lingoda and started the class on my phone. And this was the first time that I'd done a class on the phone. In the future I had to do this a few more times, but this was the first time. And yeah, the whole lesson I was like panicking because I wasn't sure how to like use Lingoda properly on the phone. and I couldn't write any notes or anything. So that is the very first time where I almost missed a class. And if I hadn't have had my notification on at that time, and I hadn't have got that 30-minute before class reminder, I would have 100% not made it back in time at all. And I just want to mention, if you are going on holiday while you're doing the Lingoda stuff, just be super careful, because 2 out of these 3 times where I almost failed were while I was on holiday. And I think it's because you're not in your usual rhythm and you just kind of like are more forgetful and you're doing lots of stuff. So this next time I want to talk about is probably the funniest and the most stressful by far. It's when me and my boyfriend were in Sydney for a holiday, and we were only there for the weekend, and my class was at about 6 p.m. I think, and we were supposed to get to a friend's house for me to have that class at the house, but we ended up underestimating how long it would take to get there. We thought it would only take an hour from the city to the house, but actually it was going to take an hour and a half, which didn't leave enough time for us to be 100% sure that we were going to make it to the house. So what I decided was, and I thought this was such a good idea at the time, and guys, it was a really bad idea. I really advised not trying to take a class in a cafe or in a loud environment. Basically what happened was, I had this genius idea that we could take my class in a Starbucks in the center of Sydney. I'm not sure if you can see where this is going, but we got into the Starbucks. There was so many people in there, and it was like nighttime. Everything was super loud. There was no charging plugs. I couldn't connect via my computer, and so I had to use my phone. Inevitably, I had to use my boyfriend's headphones, and they weren't working. Like, anything that could go wrong was going wrong. And I ended up, when the class did start, I ended up connecting with the headphones. They couldn't hear me. The background noise was too loud, and since the headphones were broken, I couldn't look at the screen and do the lesson while being able to speak and hear. What ended up happening was I saw this staff room, and since we were already 5 minutes into the class, I just thought, screw it. I looked at Quentin and I was just like, you just stay there. I'm just gonna sneak into this staff area and just take this freaking class on speakerphone. So that's what I did. I literally snuck into this staff only area, and I took my lesson while it was on speaker, and while I was looking at my phone. And mind you, this whole time my phone was slowly going down in battery and there was no plugs, and also I could barely hear a single thing. And the reason I went into the staff room is because it was so loud in the cafe that I had to like find somewhere quieter. And even after going into this staff room, it was still so loud, but I could just hear. Anyway, I 100% thought that I wasn't gonna pass this class because I was so stressed. I was like sweating from stress. I could barely hear. The teacher would like ask me questions, and I had no idea because I couldn't skip back or forward. I don't know. I was just panicking pretty much. And then I had about 10 or 5 minutes left in the class, and a freaking staff member for Starbucks comes into the staff room, looks at me. I look at him, and he's like, "You can't be in here." And I was just like, shh, and I'm like nodding like, yes, I'm leaving. But at the same time, I'm literally telling him to be quiet. So I felt kind of bad, but he did come in super aggressive. Anyway, so I left the staff room and I just stayed. It was so awkward because I had to keep looking at the staff guy who just kicked me out because he was packing up the cafe as well. And that's why he called me, because he was putting the chairs in the staff room and whatnot. And I literally stayed just outside of the staff room where it was the least quiet and continued to take my class for 5 more minutes as the guy who just kicked me out kept going back and forth with chairs, putting them in the staff room. And I was just trying to avoid eye contact with him because I thought I was going to get kicked out. He probably just thought I was crazy because I was speaking French, looking at my phone like a frantic person. After that, I was extremely convinced that I wasn't going to get a mark for that class. I must have sounded so confused to the teacher as well. I kept having to ask her to repeat. Connection was going in and out. Overall, it was super stressful, but also I'm thankful because if I didn't go into that staff room, there's no way I could have taken that class. And after that, this is kind of a side story, it's not a whole story in itself, but when I was booking my bus back from Sydney to Canberra, I accidentally booked a non-refundable bus ticket, which was $80, at the same time as my French class. So I was literally considering taking my French class while I was on the bus, and I'm so glad I didn't do that because when I was actually on the bus, it was so loud and there's no way I could have taken the class, and there's no way I can just like jump off the bus, take the class, and yeah. But I ended up having to pay $60 for a whole new bus ticket. So that's the second time I almost failed, and definitely the most stressful one. And this third and final time I almost failed, I'm putting this last time to me just becoming cocky with Lingoda and becoming more careless, I suppose. So this was in the third month, and I'd stopped putting all of the classes in my calendar. I don't know why. I really advise don't do this. I think I was just becoming super complacent and lazy with it, and I got used to having all my classes in the afternoon, so I thought that I didn't really need to check. And I started having my classes a lot later as well. I started having them at like 9 p.m. at night instead of 5 p.m. like I used to. So during this, I really should have been checking the times more because I changed my window from when I was having classes. But instead, I started checking less and less. Anyway, at this time, me and my dad had gone for a walk around this lake that's near our house, and it's a 1-hour walk to go all the way around. Anyway, we got halfway around the lake, and for some reason, I don't know why, I just got this weird feeling, and it was around 5 p.m. and that night I thought that I had a class at 9 p.m. because I looked at my calendar on the wall, because I had one on the wall as well, and I looked at the week before or the week after. So stupid. So I thought my class wasn't for another 4 hours, but I don't know why. I was just chatting with Dad and I just got this weird feeling, and I decided to check my phone. And I checked my phone and it was 5 minutes to 5. And I was like, I checked my Lingoda, and at that moment I realized that my class was starting in 5 minutes. Literally, I was just so calm. I looked at my dad and I was like, Dad, my class starts in 5 minutes. We're gonna have to stop next to the lake and I'm gonna have to take my class on my phone. And he was like, are you serious? And I'm like, yeah. And that's what we did. I literally took a seat next to the lake and I sat there and I took my class on my phone. At this point, I was more used to taking classes on my phone because I'd done it a couple times. And it's interesting because this third and final one was because I'd become so complacent and wasn't doing as much effort and checking up on stuff as I was in the first month. And yet it was the time where I think could have been the closest to me failing, because at least the first 2 times, the first time I got a 30-minute reminder, so I had time to prepare or run. And the second time I knew I had a class, it was just about my surroundings. But this third and final time, I had no idea I had a class. I wasn't in the right surroundings at all to take the class. Like, so many things could have gone wrong. If my phone didn't have battery, I couldn't have taken the class. Usually I don't have any battery on my phone. So for me to have enough battery to do a 1-hour class, I had just enough. I think I had 30% battery, and seconds after the class finished, it died. So those are the 3 times I almost failed. And it's funny because that last time when I was talking to the teacher and whatnot, he heard ducks in the background. Anyway, the reason I wanted to tell you these stories, they are kind of funny, but at the same time, if I had have messed up one of these 3 times, I would have essentially lost more than $1,000. And also, don't get cocky towards the end of the sprint like me. You should be taking the end of the sprint as seriously as you are taking the first month of the sprint as well. And another thing, if you are going on holidays, just remember, if you're going into a place that's a different time zone, that Lingoda will keep the time zone that you set at the very start of the sprint. And if you try to change the time zone throughout the sprint, then you will be disqualified. So don't try to change the time zone, and also keep in mind that the site itself will remain on the time zone, and then it's your responsibility if you are on holidays to do that calculation yourself. Moral of the story, do as I say, not as I do. So I've given you guys warnings, and just don't follow me as an example. Next, I want to talk about the sprint rules themselves. Now, as I said in the beginning, I made this massive list of every single thing that can get you disqualified, everything, and I put them in dot point form so that I have a more clear understanding of what I'm going to do that will cause me to actually have a disqualification. Now, I won't go too much into this because I will put the list or the Word document in the description so you guys can have a look for yourself, but I'll just have a look with you guys for a minute. As you can see, I've dot pointed everything out, and it's got everything from not attending the full 60 minutes, not being able to attend a class during internet connections, not actively participating, all of the kind of things that you guys need to remember so that you don't fail. And the reason I wanted to make actually this, I made it a while ago, and I wanted to share it in one of the Lingoda groups that I'm in, because I noticed that it's not that clear on the terms and conditions, every single thing. For example, I'm including things like if your payment can't be taken out of your bank account because they take 3 or 4 payments throughout the entire sprint, then if you don't pay that in 3 days, you can be disqualified, as well as other things like not using a credit that's refunded with you until after the sprint. And what I mean by that is if a teacher cancels a lesson, you'll be refunded that credit. They don't tell you until a few hours before the class, but you'll be refunded that credit, but don't use it until after the sprint. And they want you to pretty much contact them after the sprint if you have these remaining credits, and they'll extend your account for another month and then they'll lock you out. So don't panic if you look again after the sprint and your account's been deactivated. It just means that you need to contact support and they will extend your account. Don't use that credit because it will obviously disqualify you. So yeah, there's all these little things that they put in here to try to catch you, but I'm not going to let it happen, okay? I want you to win. For those of you doing the regular sprint, obviously these rules are going to be a little bit different, but the main warning that I have for you guys that I've seen, the reason that a lot of people fail is, yes, you're supposed to do 15 classes a month, but make sure you know when a month starts and a month finishes in Lingoda, because it's not necessarily a month, it's just 30 days from a date to another date. And if you book more or less than 15 within that date frame, then you will be disqualified. And I think that's a very common way for people to be disqualified in the regular sprint, because it's less obvious than just one class a day. And lastly, I just wanted to give you guys my last little bits of advice if you are doing the sprint or if you're thinking about doing it, to make sure you have the best chance of success. This includes putting every single one of your classes in a calendar, whether that be a wall calendar or preferably a notification that you get on your phone, as well as having your classes around the same time every single day to minimize confusion. I'd also just suggest not having classes really early in the morning, because I have heard a lot of people not remembering to set their alarms and then they've just failed because they haven't woken up in time. Another thing, make sure that your phone is accessible and is charged and has data, just in case that your Wi-Fi cuts and you can quickly switch over to your 3G or 4G off your phone. That can be a lifesaver as well. And make sure if you're not going to be at your house or wherever you do take your classes, that you test the internet beforehand, so you're not panicking when the class actually starts and you realize that the internet's not working. With the calendars, I did have a wall calendar, but like I said, I primarily used my phone to track all of that. But I did have a wall calendar so that if my people that I was living with, like my dad or something, wanted to plan something with me, he could just check on the calendar and see if I was free at that time. And the last thing I wanted to mention to you guys, if you do fail or if you do miss a class, don't let that bring you down, because at the end of the day, just remind yourself how much you've improved and how much you've gained. And also, Lingoda isn't actually that expensive when you look at the class and cost ratio as well. I think the worst thing that you can do is miss a class early on and then just not take the rest of the sprint seriously, because yes, winning money back or not having to pay for something is great, but to be honest, if I didn't win this sprint and if I failed it, I wouldn't actually care at all, because I've gained so much. I've gone from, start of A2 level to B1 level, which I wasn't being able to achieve by studying by myself. And that's why I always say that before you start the sprint, be okay with the amount of money that it is before you begin the sprint. Don't just think, okay, I'm gonna do this just so I can win money back, just so I can have free classes. Because trust me, if you do it like that, you're just going to not be motivated if something actually does go wrong. As you can see in my video, you can be as prepared and as ready as ever, and you can still potentially fail. Give this video a like and subscribe if you like these types of videos. Remember, I'll put all of the rules in the description so you can check that out. If you have any questions about the sprint or anything like that, feel free to comment below. And I'll also put my referral link. I'm not sponsored or anything like that. It just gives me 5 free credit for classes and it gives you 50 euros off. Hope you enjoyed the video. Good luck if you're doing the sprint, and if my lazy ass can do it, then so can you.